Welcome back to Coming Together, Interrelationships of Evolutionary Astrology Teachings. This is Bradley Narragon. I'm very excited today. We have in the studio with us special guest Rose Marcus. Welcome, Rose.
Thank you, Bradley. Great to be with you today.
If you don't know, well, if you're listening to this, you probably know who Rose is, but maybe not. But Rose has been doing astrology for multiple lifetimes. Um, and I do have some questions about that, but also I want to introduce, if you want to find her, rosemarcus.com. And you've been doing a monthly podcast with Kristen Fontana, is that correct?
Yeah, Kristen and I have been doing Healthy Life radio, Guiding Stars, and we've been doing that once a month since, since about 2012, I think.
Wow.
So looking at the month ahead. So we've been doing it for a very long time.
And then I saw it's on your website. Where else can people find that?
Yeah, I posted on my website. The Kristen posted on hers. It's on the healthylife.net website, and we also posted on the EA Zoom meetings as well too. So it's out there. You can find it if you want to.
Excellent.
It's broadcast live the last Friday of every month, and is available throughout the month for you to look at.
That's right. Okay, got it. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, so you've been teaching with Laura Nalbandian and Patricia Walsh, Soulwise School of Evolutionary Astrology, right? In your
Yeah, so we launched Soulwise in 2019, and so we are a few years into our teaching together, which has been quite wonderful. We do an in-depth course. It is 50 plus weeks. We're just setting up for the next round for intermediate level, which will be in January. And if you're interested in that, Soulwise is the name of the school, and you can contact me for info. The course will start live in January, but you can join it now and watch 12 pre-recorded videos, 2 hours each, classes on the archetypes. So it's been wonderful, and it's been just absolutely delightful to share that teaching with two outstanding astrologers. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's such a great lineup. I've thought of I was like, I kind of want to go just to
Well, the beauty of evolutionary astrology is that we are building community, right? You feel it. You're part of that community. We've just finished a conference together. But anybody who has come into this work, that's exactly what they feel. And students who come into it, we're kind of a family for life, I think. You never lose that bond, and it's this very special. It's kind of unspoken. We teach the Soulwise course, of course, online, as we do many things nowadays. You and I have participated in live conferences and so on, and there nothing beats coming together with a family, right? But even
yeah.
through the online instruction, I think we forge our bonds with each other, and the students grow very tight throughout the instruction, and we pair people up, and the what we do with evolutionary astrology is kind of skip the superficial. We can get right into it. What people share is profound, and it's deep, and it's heartfelt. And I'm talking about students sharing their own personal experiences, what you expect to get out of evolutionary astrology, how you can be understood by others, how you can be
Mm.
supported by others. It's really quite brilliant.
That's so beautiful. And like when you were sharing that, I just realized that this is a key piece to, okay, so I've been having this question, which is kind of like, um, I guess it's, I guess like I've been saying, so what now? Like in the sense of, okay, so let's say somebody gets into evolutionary astrology, and at first there's, that, I mean, to me, it's kind of mind blowing. Like, you walk up to someone on the street and you say, "What's the desire and nature of your soul?" How are you going to respond to that? And so to have this kind of depth of psychological self-awareness is so profound. And I think that, um, I guess, okay, here's where I'm going with this is for me, I had this experience where, um, obviously, I really embraced the whole paradigm, and it was, I felt like probably similar to you, this is what I've needed my whole life to make sense of everything in life, and have this great insight into myself that I never had before. And then even with that knowledge and insight, as the years go by, there can be moments in our lives or events where, um, it's like I'm aware that this is my pattern, and like I'm seeing myself do the pattern, you know, and it's like, okay, well, what else do I do? Kind of in the sense of like, ju like sometimes I feel like just the, um, awareness in the mind of what all this means isn't. I don't want to say isn't enough, but like kind of like it's deeper than that. And I know that you can speak to that, but this is kind of just something I've been playing with of, um, like what else do we do besides, it's just like if somebody comes for a reading, it could be this profound knowledge that changes their lives, but and we at some point there's these other elements. So when you're starting to talk about the community, then I was kind of having this, well, of course, I think that's such a huge key piece to this is also having a sense of belonging. And I guess I hadn't thought of that because I think that when we feel like, we were watching ourselves and we've failed ourselves, or like, here I am just repeating my pattern, like I'm not, but then we have that mirror of community that we belong in, that we're held, and that this is a natural process. Um, it's a different experience. I don't know if am I making sense at all?
Well, I think the thing is that through the study, you become observant, right? And you start to see, you start to look with different eyes, right? And I think about it sometimes like the cameraman behind the camera, watching the movie going on, right? Sometimes it is like that, and um, I think a whole lifetime is an observation exercise. And I'm thinking right now, as I'm getting to be the age that I am, of exactly those kinds of thoughts as well too. Not so much about, oh, I'm seeing my patterns, and here I'm repeating things, and here it goes again, and all of that. But um, what's the life all about? Kind of in the bigger picture, here I am at this age, and what next? And eventually I'm going to leave the planet. and and it's kind of it's an interesting consciousness to have, right? And as you were talking, I was also thinking of chop wood, carry water, right? Before before enlightenment and after enlightenment, it is that whole observation track, and what you are observing and um, bearing witness to is not only for um, the Bradley that is living this lifetime, but it is information that the soul is drinking in, right? Um, and and I think that at that level, you know, the you that is I is serving that bigger picture, agenda for the soul. The soul is utilizing, the ego self, the conscious self, to do its exploration, and that information is getting kind of fed into the main frame. Do you know what I'm
Hmm.
getting at?
I think
You know,
so. I think
at
so.
that kind of level, right? So you are meant to be present and aware and experiencing in every single moment. And that information is going to be something that you personally are going to work with, but it is also being banked or deposited into the soul's memory banks as well too, to be utilized um, for a kind of much larger narrative.
Hmm.
Does that explain it? I hope it does. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, do you ever, I guess I had this thought recently of um, like if
And it's
somebody,
like, yeah,
oh,
it's just actually, we're moving through time, right? As the mortal beings that we are.
the I guess so like if you I've been playing with this idea like so if you go to a doctor, naturopath, whoever, right? And you get checked out and maybe, they talk about what's observed and what's going on, and then there's recommendations possibly, right? Or a prescription of, prescription of some kind of like it would be helpful if you did these things. And I think that that's one of the pieces I've been playing with too is um, like if we can have that lens and even have moments where we see it, see ourselves and understand this soul journey. And then is there also, like what are the other things that come up in life that we gravitate to, or, um, and I mean, it could be anything, and I know it's different for everybody based on the nature of who they are. I guess it's kind of that thought of, do you ever find yourself, just drawn to recommending certain things or seeing certain people have, because I think like in the terms of like that prescription, it's like besides just the knowledge of the chart, there are also these recommendations of maybe try this in life, or not that we necessarily know what someone else is going to resonate for them, but what I'm getting at, like, or do we just kind of stumble upon these other pieces and we're like, oh wow, this in conjunction with EA is, you know, I don't know, like, I mean, some of it could just be diet, um, some of it's just general wellness, perhaps. But yeah, some of it maybe is the need for community and creating a sense of belonging. I don't know, I'm just kind of getting at this piece of, um, and I guess it's just something that each individual needs to discover for themselves, perhaps. You know,
Well, I think you're talking about an individual's creative process, and there are several different levels. It is your relationship to yourself, and then it is your relationship to your immediate world, and then it is your relationship to the world beyond that, and eventually, your connection with, the universal energy there with spirit, and so forth, right? So you're operating at all those different levels. In terms of what I see when I have a client come to me is I always see how individuals are synchronizing with their chart, right? So and that's an unfolding process called life, right? I'm here right now, and these are my challenges, and these are my dilemmas, and so forth. And I might be dealing with that in this particular moment in time, and we can see that reflected in the transits, and how things are being set up. And there is an agenda that the soul has for the life, that is that is very recognizable in terms of plotting forward with progressions and transits and so forth. So there's a certain amount of quota that the soul aims for in a lifetime to experience. Thinking about myself and the age that I am right now and all that I've been through in my life, I think my ambition is to be conscious. I want to be as fully aware, fully cognizant of of myself and how I am creating and what I'm interfacing with. I aim to recognize and participate and be as fully present as I can be. And that's my purpose at the moment, I think. And within that, of course, the pathway that I've chosen, my desire to assist others on the path. I'm in service to my clients, but I'm in service to my immediate world as well too, the people in it. I'm synchronicity and destiny is never lost on me. I recognize, and oh my gosh, if I can go back and, some of those very special moments that you have when it's a conversation, when it's a meeting, when it is an intersection, when it is a choice, that you're facing a crossroads and so on. Those moments when you look back on them, right? People come into your life, the people that come into my life, that I have the ability to assist in whatever way I do. You know, um, it's profound. It's a profound journey, right? Profound journey, and it can be very simple things. Very simple things. Just a kindness here, or a conversation there. And I'm always very aware of the flow through of life. How there's this moment and it's really fleeting no matter how long you might be dealing with that situation, that circumstance, that relationship. It's always fleeting, right? It's always shifting, always changing, the nature of evolution.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I love that. Seeing if somebody's synchronized with their chart. I think I've never heard that phrase or thought of it like that. That's a that's really interesting.
It's like as people come up to their thresholds and it's like, oh, and now I'm dealing with this crises or this challenge or what have you. They weren't dealing with it a little while ago. They're dealing with it now, right? And so this is, looking ahead to see what that is. And of course, you want to support. And as you were talking about prescription, going to the doctor and so on, if you think about that, again, there's only so much that we can do. I mean, we offer whatever kind of support and advice and as I always say, hold up the mirror for your client to be able to look into, to support them to make their own choices, to understand themselves at a better level, so that they can do their own work. I mean, that's what we want to, want to give to anyone who comes seeking. Of course, I'm not going to tell you what to do, right? I'm going to help you to create for yourself, and that's vastly important. But when you think of, just you were talking about a prescription, the doctor, and you come in, you say, well, you need to eat better and sleep better and do some exercise and so on. You're limited within a scope based on your physical form, right? And so forth. So there's only so much. And we know this, there's nothing about perfection, right? And what I've said a lot in terms of various lectures or things I've said is that there's no kind of period at the end of the sentence. Everything that we're doing is for integrative. The experiential track is woven in, it's integrative. You don't get to the end of something. You don't get to the end of an emotion, for example, if it's grief. for example. You don't get to the end of it. You get to a place where that is not as much a front runner when we're talking about things that are painful, for example. Eventually they get woven into the fabric of consciousness, and then we utilize that, to continue to build.
Is that it's um, that sounds like when you were saying that, I immediately went to this concept that that's what we speak of with this deconditioning process of, to me, this Western mind of like, I have completed this. I was just listening to a whole thing on grief and how in the Western culture we don't have healthy, they're emerging more and more now, but we've definitely lacked these healthy models of grief. And it's like, okay, you've had your week of bereavement, back to work, or or like, but and even if we know that we're not done with something, there's this deeper psychological sense of um, like accomplishment because we completed something. So I love how you're saying, there's not a period at the end of the sentence necessarily. And um, it seems like this psychological trap that of the culture and the times of, wanting to, have some kind of bookmark or pinnacle, or, like now it's this, and it's actually kind of constantly in a process. Uh,
Yeah, in class one day, a student piped up and said, "Well, I understand all of this, and she's, really doing wonderful with the evolutionary astrology end of things." She said, "I'm not really sure if I've done enough, or accomplished a task, or so on." And it's this thing of getting to the end of the road someplace, right? And I think in each lifetime, and this has to do with cycles as well too, various points in our life. This is sometimes with pedal to the metal, that intensity dial, right? And then we need to pull back sometimes, so we can go into it. Like that's the ebb and flow piece of things. And right now we're dealing with the 18-month nodal axis of Aries Libra, and that's going into relationship, and then coming, and being with self. And, it's kind of that swinging back and forth. There are times when we are, intensifying our evolution and going at it full steam in terms of, trying to decondition, trying to break down, trying to move through, having those breakthroughs, confronting, etc. And then there are times when you just have to ease off a bit and relax, right? And that's very important as well too. And sometimes we do that in various lifetimes. Sometimes we choose to sit out, you know, having that intensity dial up. And, sometimes I see that with women who are feeling conflicted about the idea of having children in this lifetime, and sometimes I look at the chart and think that, there's been a lot of responsibility over past lifetimes, and maybe this one, and so on, right? I mean, there's so many different ways, that you've been confronting your own evolution. And this life is just, it's a sentence on the page, right? Of quite an extensive volume, right?
yeah. Uh, the this is sort of tied to this idea of the deconditioning piece. Curious to hear what some of your thoughts on this. So, okay, I don't know how true this is at all, but at some point, at least in the larger astrology community, and which is small for me, and mainly going to Norwalk once a year or something, and um, a little bit here and there. But what I noticed is that I didn't see the evolutionary stages talked about a lot um, at times, and I've been kind of playing with this idea. I did a little podcast called "The Problem with Evolutionary Stages," and And so I've been thinking about this a lot, and so I'm really curious to hear some of your thoughts and insight on it. And I think I've kind of come to like two, I guess like two main things that I see as quote unquote. It's not necessarily a problem with the stages, but the psychological challenges that arise in this culture as we work with these things called evolutionary stages. One of them being, of course, this self-judgment piece, and then this concept of um, like progress in this linear sense, and the judgment of I should be here or am I there, or like all the psychological pitfalls and traps that can occur when we lay this seemingly timeline on and put this emphasis on like, yeah, this is where you're supposed to be. Like one of the things I loved in the conference, and I can't remember if it was Laura or it came out in another talk, was um, basically like there's nothing wrong with a skipped step, like it's not even like it's natural. Like there's no like shame about like, oh, you have a skipped step, it's just like it's just something that happens for souls, like it's it's just part of the process. Yeah. And so this whole deconstructing piece of um I mean, I've definitely, some people will be like, oh, like I'm not that far along, or I want to think that I'm further along than I am, and so it's like so like there's that thing that I've noticed with the evolutionary stages. So that's one of them, and then the second one I think is we're living in a larger um, uh, cultural experience and place and time in the globe where we look around and we say the how the consensus culture is not just like living but like kind of like accepting certain norms is kind of this path of unsustainability for life itself. And so um, I often think about, well, there's a lot of consensus, um, this idea that 75, 73%, like this chunk of the population is this in the consensus. So the thought that if you're in a culture where you look at the consensus and you say, this is terrible, what's happening, it's just it's situational within this lifetime in that consensus culture, but that would not necessarily be true for the majority of cultures and places in time over the last thousands of years, perhaps, or maybe it, like it wouldn't. Um, so I guess I've been thinking about um, the evolutionary stages and how. I mean, I know it's crucial in the EA and the school, and that's always kind of this first thing to start with is this understanding of where's the soul at. And it seems like there's this other level of like sometimes it's not helpful information for somebody, like maybe in the background there's this awareness of it, but is it actually going to be helpful for that person to categorize themselves in terms of that frame of reference? So I,
Now, I say with the evolutionary states, which I think are brilliant and so essential to the understanding of chart interpretation, I am never going to tell somebody what their evolutionary state is. You know, I think that it is mainly students that are coming into the study who are trying to figure that out, but I think as a reference point, because it gives you a different interpretation, when you are looking at the chart. And, I have to say that a lot of times when we do teach the evolutionary states that we get this kind of flack, because I think that there's this hyper, um, oh, I don't know, this hyperness going on right now with definitions, with languaging and so on. It's like, you have to use the proper pronouns and, all of that kind of stuff, where I'm not such a, I'm not so offended by all that stuff, like, maybe because I grew up with it, like, I don't know, there's some song that's a Christmas song, and, they're everybody's so pissed off because it's so sexist when it was really quite sweet, like yeah, like all of that. But
I see what you're
you
saying.
know,
Yeah.
it's the judgment patterns of the hierarchies and how the consensus is so low and spiritual is so high and all those I don't ascribe to any of that, right? I don't, and there are distortions at every state, right? So when we think of consensus and that majority of the population, we are thinking about or witnessing perhaps the more distorted end of things, but again, the consensus, we have to learn how to live in an organized whole, right? So there's something about learning to work within the category of external reality, right?
Mm,
Problem is, with we're now at, this is my whole thing with Pluto and Capricorn, and we're at this transition of the ages. We're on this breakdown of all of the structure of consciousness, and we see that all of these old models of the hierarchies and the way that we are governing ourselves, politics, social structures, all of that, it's time to tear all that down and rebuild it for sure, right? But in terms of having some kind of consensus where we all agree, what is appropriate and what's not, this is to make that change so that is more aligned with natural law and what is more natural and authentic for a human being, living on this planet, right? So I think that that's where all the changes, come through. But yeah, I do see that maybe the languaging sometimes gets in the way, I think, for me, as a young person, before meeting up with evolutionary astrology, I felt fundamentally different. I was in a consensus-based reality. My family was, consensus, maybe first state consensus. I felt alien. I felt totally misunderstood. And very much alone, very lonely. And until I was able to navigate my way through my life and understand myself better. So for me, and just seeing how people get together and relationship dynamics as well too, understanding those evolutionary states are so important. It's such a key piece, I just think that
mhm.
anybody who has a problem with it needs to adjust how they're thinking about it.
Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting in terms of relationship. I mean, I certainly never had this lens to even consider like, oh, I'm entering into a significant relationship. Are we at the same, you guys, you kind of think of like, do we have the same values, which kind of reveals evolutionary stages perhaps, but that is that is something to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in Pluto too, Jeffrey goes through various relationship types, and something like teacher student, that can be a different evolutionary state, right? And so on. And sometimes when you understand that parameter, and, I've counseled, so many people over so many years, and I see relationships are so vastly different. Every relationship is very unique. But if you understood that you were in a teacher-student relationship, you might be, if you understand kind of the conceptual piece of that, it might give you more patience with with that partner or with that dynamic. You might see it in a different way if you can. This is the whole thing. Um, you know, naming it, being able to name it, it is the start of being able to integrate the information of it, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right. Um, So we kind of started to get into a little bit of the larger collective realities. And I have this other kind of thing that I've been chewing on. Curious, you could take a sip here. I've been thinking about how right now on the planet we have this very different experience of life. And so, I mean, for you, you've been working with people for so many years. So, this is great because you kind of have a really strong reference of, you know, 10, 20 years ago. I mean, in a sense, we're dealing with the same issues, but then on another hand, here's my thought is like, you know, like with the internet today and what we potentially can be exposed to on a daily basis or even throughout the day, you know, like there's kind of no escaping the reality of the trauma that's happening in the world and the horrors that are happening in the world. And
Yeah.
you could roll out of bed and then, you know, see a kid that was just, you know, shot or something, you know, like you just, or, you know, you name it, right? And so it's kind of, I guess I've been thinking about this in terms of this collective thing. It's kind of like this new phenomena where like, and I know like it's not fair to kind of just like paint some picture of the past and compare it to the future, but just for the sake of like kind of painting a picture anyway, you know, like if I think about, you know, um, the horrors that somebody might go through in another lifetime, yeah, it could be years, it could be a whole lifetime, but a lot of times we have this set thing where like there's more of like the isolated event of like there was these two or really three big things that happened in that lifetime that were really challenging, and you know the soul's working to figure out how to navigate that and go from there. And even though you know the sense of like, okay, maybe this isn't directly happening to my life or my community, we're now faced with this awareness that somewhere somebody just lost their home, somewhere you know a whole community was just destroyed somewhere. um, and it's kind of, I mean, like on one hand, like it seems like it's a lot, you know, it's kind of like almost like the whole idea of the Saturn as this you know, filter of consciousness of like, hey, yeah, I love that functional filter because there's so many different radio waves and things. Like if we were tuning into all of them right now, we would be crazy. You know, like we would have gone to Uranus and beyond, maybe not in a good way. Um, but it's almost like this acceleration that we're going into is kind of like we're exposed to more information than we humanly normally wouldn't have been in ways that we haven't been before. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on all of this?
Well, you know, I kind of get what you're getting at. You know, trauma and crises and devastation. You know, and really horrible things that happen to people. You know, forever, right? You know, we're just getting a row view right now to all of that, right? You know, but what I think is that as I said a moment ago, with the intensity dial up pedal to metal, right? You know, this is, you know, what social media is allowing us to have a front row seat to trauma and war and, you know, horrible things and so forth, right? You know, and I think that this is getting to, I guess, I want to say a saturation point or a, you know, a tipping point, you know, in terms of how much we're getting. You know, it's like I also want to say, you know, I think that, you know, as we um, apparently use just a very small portion of our brain, right? You know, and as we are evolving, so too is our brain's capacity, you know, to store all that information, take all that information in. And it reminds me also too of like, um, you know, movie making, you know, and you know these movies now with animation and so on, you know, where before we didn't have all of the the science to create all of these kind of wild things. And now you've got these big explosions, and if you see a movie it's supposed to be like an adventure or so on, and it doesn't have like it's like, oh well, it's a flop, or do you know what I'm saying? It's like we get acclimatized to a higher level, right? And this is what we're doing right now, is getting acclimatized to a higher level of all of this, really in the extremity that's going on the planet. And what worries me a little bit is becoming numb. So we become so numb. It's like, oh yeah, well that's for example, right now, Israel's conflict has overtaken Ukraine's. So is that just going to kind of disappear now? The front, the what the media is now giving us is daily, what's going on with the Israeli conflict here, but Ukraine is in the background there someplace. Well, the suffering and devastation is still going on there, like it was before this conflict happened. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's all of this. We're getting more used to this is the way it is. And yet, at the same time, I think that there is a tipping point here. I don't know. I feel this intuitively. I don't know if I'm right about this, but um, it was Israel was going to launch an attack on the Gaza Strip, and that hasn't quite happened in the way they said. And then the Hamas released a couple of hostages yesterday. I have this feeling that everybody's kind of pulling back a little bit. It's like this idea of, vengeance, we're going to heap the, wrath on you, blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of like, you know, the way that we have destroyed one another in the past, I think that somewhere inside of us, we're kind of going like, where's our humanity? And like, I mean, I think the horrors are still happening. I think the violence is still happening. All the crazy is still happening. But I also think underneath that, we're coming to recognize that we don't want to create this kind of reality, right? And that's going to have to reach more of a saturation point before we make the fundamental change that is so necessary. Is it going to eradicate war and violence and destruction on the planet? Not, probably not. But yeah, and it's kind of, how far do we get in annihilation, and that's got to do with Mother Nature as well as towards each other, before we move to a whole different way of creating.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is part of Pisces and the Neptune archetype, right? It's collective service. When things happen to the masses, like mass destruction, floods that take out large groups of people, earthquakes, the wars and so forth, um, each one of us have chosen to incarnate at this time on the planet. And we have our own individual evolution to accomplish, but we are all part of the whole. And, each one of us serves the collective agenda as well, too. And this is, again, bearing witness, right? And so, the the masses that suffer, are, I mean, it's kind of an awkward statement to say, but, have kind of signed up to serve that collective uh, by giving us this experience so that we can wake up some more, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like really maybe an awkward way of putting that information across, but you
It,
get what I'm getting at.
yeah. It's interesting in the sense of that I can't help but through the lens of evolutionary astrology also think about how this correlates to the north node of Uranus in Gemini, that there's this larger humanity group witnessing through social media, like you're not doing that in this hidden place anymore. Like everybody's watching actually, guess what? You know. Um,
And
and
no immunity, no immunity. You can't be immune. We are all part of that whole, right? That's it. Uranus and Gemini. Everything, everywhere, all at once.
there's also, it seems like there's a little bit of this parallel of, um, like as individuals, we hold really hard, painful things in our past, whether it's this lifetime or other lifetimes or all of it combined, and this whole idea that, um, on some levels, we're kind of learning to hold space for these things that are really, it's not comfortable, but to just kind of be like, okay, yeah, there's the thing. I'm bearing witness to this part of myself, and it really hurts. And like, okay, I see you. It seems, in a sense, as the collective organism is kind of doing that, in a sense, not by, I mean, maybe by choice. I mean, I don't know how to, in some sense.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as Pluto moves through Aquarius, and Uranus is a 7-year transit moving through the signs, right? So while Pluto is in Aquarius, Uranus is just finishing up in Taurus right now, and it's going to move into Gemini, and then it's going to move into Cancer, and it's going to be just at the start of Leo by the time Pluto leaves Aquarius. And we consider the Aquarius archetype in evolutionary astrology to be the signature for trauma, right? Collective trauma, personal trauma, right? Unlocking of all of that. This is what I was thinking about that movement of Uranus in Taurus, or Uranus moving through the signs, is that Taurus is a fixed archetype, right? And it is an archetype of what is kind of held in an inert state, right? And just for me, just kind of in this kind of bigger picture thing, in terms of that, you know, mm, reawakening, the trauma that has been locked in and that is at that state of inertia. Mm, uh, Uranus moving into Gemini is a mobilization of that, right? Uranus in Cancer, that's a cardinal archetype, that is again moving that forward in terms of finding that internal self-consistency, and that identification that we have with our trauma, and moving it to the Uranus in Leo, which is utilizing, all of that creative fodder, to personal and collective reinvention. It just
Hmm.
struck me that kind of patterning is quite interesting. Um, I myself am Aquarius rising. I have Uranus conjunct my south node. It's been a lifetime of trauma for me. And I was just thinking about that, how much of the trauma that I've been exposed to and so on in my life, it's like my intention for that was move it out of the inertia place, move it forward, that's
Hmm.
part of that dynamic.
Hmm.
And that was just a thought that I had in terms of that evolution during the time that Pluto moves through the sign of Aquarius.
Do you have any thoughts of, I don't know, like what are some of the things that you talk about for help to help people, like to move, get that moving within themselves, or uh,
Well, again, I'm a, I think naming it to begin with, I think being honest, I'm not doing well here, you know, I'm in a place here where, and to be okay with that then, I think I need to have a meltdown right now, or I think I need to withdraw right now, or I think I need to reach for help right now. I think I need to tell you that I'm not okay. And, I think that it starts with a level of personal honesty, right? To bear witness to yourself, right? And, again, I always recognize that life is always moving forward, right? And, no matter how intense the trauma is, how intense the pain is, how how absolutely disconnected you can feel, and so forth. Um, there is always something that you can do, right? So you may live. I myself, I describe it as having a period where, I kind of lived as a trapped spirit. The trauma was so deep, so intense that I think I was pretty much out of my body most of the time, right? And yet, um, I was still able to function. We do what we can as we can. You just do the simple things. Sometimes the simple things, it's like when you have a stroke, you have to learn how to walk again or feed yourself again or get dressed again. And sometimes it is pulling it right down to the basics, just making sure that you can take care of the survival things. Sometimes that is really important. Do what you can as you can and try not to build it up so intense for yourself, because when you look at the mountain that you have to climb, sometimes you don't even want to get started, right?
Yeah. Right.
Do you know?
Yeah.
you know and you know well, you know I always go back to, a woman who's giving birth, right? Who's kind of in the throes of it, going, I can't. Well, you are, and you will. you know and it is, those really extreme moments when you feel like giving up on yourself, when you feel that you are facing impossible odds. you know um, Look around and you will find a gift someplace. you know Spirit is always with you. I can't tell you the moments in my life that were super, super intense, when I knew the hand of God was moving me to where, out of the danger zone, right? Wherever it
Mhm.
might have been, right? And no matter what your challenge is, um, there's support from the divine. And you have to trust that. And you have to do what is within your capacity, no matter how small. That's my advice.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I've been coming across that this kind of concept a lot, and it goes exactly in that line with the last thing that you just said, which was kind of this idea of, yes, there's divine or life is there for us, but then we do have to also, like, we have to ask, like, kind of like, we have to name it, we have to speak it, we have to take the first step. If we just don't ever make the effort to engage and try to shift things, like that's our responsibility in this relationship with life.
I had a quote on my first website that I had, and it was, "Take one step towards spirit, spirit will take 1,000 steps towards you." Right? It is absolutely true. You have to be a willing participant for yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having a little time together today, Rose. I really, I mean, and for those of us listening, this is the first time that Rose and I have gotten to hang out and have a conversation. So it's really been a pleasure. to have you on today. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Bradley. I very much enjoyed my time with you today.
Likewise. Thank you. So yeah, once again, if you're listening and if you want to get a reading from Rose, that's rosemarcus.com, and from there you can explore everything else that Rose is offering and has offered and is available out there. Uh, and is there anything else that you want to add or say at this point?
Nope, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, take care.